Very honored to bring to you, first time on the program, Paul Mauro, former NYPD inspector, attorney, and founder of opsdesk.org. Also, formerly my boss in the chain of command at the NYPD Intelligence Division. Paul, it's going back 15 years now. I'm getting old, my friend. You know, I got to think back to these times now. And I was just a young buck making my way in the world. So you're launching. Let's talk about this for a second. If you're launching a new weekly Fox Nation show, Karen
Right.
Reed Retrial Live. So, my wife is a little more into the true crime stuff than I am, which I don't think I'm the only guy in America who's going to say that. But
Right.
the Karen Reed trial, we haven't talked about this on the show. Can you just tell everybody, like, why this has fascinated so many people? They're all focused in on this. What's going on?
So the stories are so divergent, and obviously only one side can be true. And this is one of those things where there are undeniably strong indicators on both sides. Now, look, I incline heavily towards the law enforcement side of things. The idea that something like five different agencies and well into double figures all colluded to try to frame this woman, I find preposterous. And now, apparently, that conspiracy has grown to include the forensics team that dumped the phone of a woman named Jen McCabe, who's the prime witness. So, that is kind of the beauty of the defense of a police conspiracy, because everything can come under that rubric. And so, as the prosecution presents its evidence, the implication on the defense side is these people have all been co-opted into some sort of a police conspiracy. But that is something that you only need one juror to entertain for Karen Reed to this time around. Remember, she was tried once already and the jury hung. You only need one to have either beyond a reasonable doubt questions to hang the jury, or if you can get all 12 to have the reasonable doubt, you have an acquittal. So, despite the fact that there is some really compelling evidence in my mind, and that should likely hold sway here, there is still
Wait, but
this
what, but
question.
Paul, what happened? I'm not sure that everybody listening knows just the what are the basic facts of the case of this Karen Reed trial, because I know in the true crime world everyone's watching this. They're fascinated. There's a
Right,
Netflix
right.
series I think out on this right now. What
Oh, there's
happened?
several. Oh, all right. So she comes back from drinking at a bar with her boyfriend. They're not live-in, but they practically live together, etc. And they go to a house party after they're out at this bar with a bunch of people, and they're invited back to this house party. And a lot of the same people are at the house party as were at the bar. That's where the stories diverge. She claims that he went in the house never to be seen alive again by her, and that in the house something happened and he was dumped on the lawn to expire from blunt force trauma and hypothermia. On the prosecution side, they say that she let him out of the car to go into the house. They were having an argument. She reversed into him, hit him. He fell backwards, bumped his head on the curb. It was the night of a historic blizzard in New England. This is all happening in Massachusetts. And then she leaves the scene. Now, that from there, that's the basic facts of the two sides of things, and that's where the story diverge. And one of the things that emerges when you tease it out is, even under the fact pattern that the prosecution is alleging, can you get to the point that it is an intentional murder? And a lot of people feel the question becomes, was the case overcharged? Because she's charged with murder two, intentional murder, and then manslaughter, and then a leaving the scene charge. So those are the two sides of things, and there are strong indicators on both sides.
What's the motivation? Why? I mean, she was angry at him, but is this a couple that had a history of domestic violence? I'm like Buck. I have not followed these cases. Sometimes I get super fascinated by them. I bet a lot of our audience is very well informed. I bet a lot of them also have not been following this. You laid out the two different arguments, but what was the motive to precipitate the argument in general? What was their relationship like? Why would something like, I think most people would say, hey, getting in a fight. I'm also betting there was a lot of alcohol involved, which makes it more difficult to know anybody who has ever been outside in cold weather. That's one of the dangers when you drink is you don't feel the cold in the same way. And if she's driving and she's been consuming alcohol, that certainly can impact things. How would we assess that?
So certainly they were drinking. The video they pulled from the night in the bar, and they'd been at another bar first, has her drinking about 9 drinks. They were all drinking a lot. There's no doubt about that. And in fact, she has 9 drinks with sidecars. In other words, a shot on the
9
side.
drinks
And
in,
then, by
I've
the
seen
way,
her picture. She weighs like 120 pounds. I mean, we're not talking about
if
9
if
drinks
that,
for like a 350-pound guy.
that's right. And then she drives. She's the one who's driving, remember?
Yeah.
And all this comes into play because it damages potentially her recollections of what occurred. So they're all banged up. There's no two ways about that. They drive to the house party. She's never been to the house before. They get there. Now look, there's no indicia of any domestic violence in the past, but you raise a really salient question because what is there is after she lets him out of the car under either fact pattern, when they dump his phone, they get voicemails from her to him. And she is screaming at him. And there's something like 50, 60 calls from her over the next couple of hours where she is screaming, cursing at him, yelling at him. Here's why that matters. Sure, it indicates that the relationship was fraying. They'd only been together a couple of years, etc. But what it also indicates to me is that she thought he was alive. She's leaving him these messages. It does sound to me like she's acting. So if she's yelling at him and she thinks he's alive, she thinks he's going to get these messages. Well, then this to me undermines the idea that the murder was intentional. And so that's why a
Yep.
lot of people do feel like the case maybe it was overcharged and that the manslaughter charge, that is an intent to injure, results in death, that might have been a more reasonable top charge.
Not to mention, if she's that drunk and driving a car, she may be reckless, to your point, but the intent of committing a murder, she might not have even been capable of it, right? Because she might be engaging in reckless behavior, but also she's so drunk, she might not have been able to even understand exactly what she was doing.
So generally in the law, the idea that you were incapacitated due to your own actions, you were drinking, you were on drugs, etc., is not going to be a defense. Where it can sometimes come in is under a diminished capacity calculus in the sentencing phase. So, we'd have to see if, that has any impact on the way this goes with the judge, and so forth, if it gets that far. But at this point in the proceedings, the key witnesses have already, in my mind, taken the stand. The prosecution really front loaded things, and that is Buck, you're well familiar with this. We were doing this when you were at the PD. The forensic digital work on the phones involved here,
Mm-hmm.
in addition to the phone stuff I just talked about, from one of the witnesses, a woman named Jen McCabe, who's been testifying, they dumped her phone at 2:27. The original allegation was that Jen McCabe Googled how long to die in the cold. If that happened at 2:27, Karen Reed has got to get off because the body's not found till 0600, 6 o'clock, actually about 6:20. However, the firm that dumped the phone, firm called Celebrate, which Buck and I worked with, we did all kinds of work with them. It's an Israeli firm. They're top of the food chain when it comes to digital forensics. They now have had to come back and cop to the fact that their software didn't really get it right. And this time around, it's probably the most compelling prosecution witness who now says that search was done by Jen McCabe at 6:23. If that's the case, it happened after the body was found, and then Jen McCabe took the stand and said, yes, that's exactly what happened. And in fact, I did that search because Karen Reed asked me to do it at the scene when we found the body. So if you believe Jen McCabe and the Google forensics guy, it's not Google, but it was a Google search. If you believe the Celebrate guy, then you really got to come out saying to yourself, Karen Reed's been lying about this, and it looks bad for her.
All right, I'm sold. I'm watching Paul Morrow's new show, Karen Reed Retrial Live. My wife, I think, is going to be. She likes the true crime stuff. She's going to love this, so we're going to have to check this out. It's on Fox Nation, Paul.
It is on Fox Nation Live today, starting at 3. We got an all-star cast coming in. It's not just me. I'm just the host here. I'm the goalie. But we're going to be doing it every week, Friday at 3, recapping this case as long as it goes on. And a lot of drama coming.
Oh, that's great. That's going to be coming up then right after we finish here, so folks can go tune right in at 3 Eastern on Fox Nation. If I could, Paul, I want to switch gears for a second and draw upon your extensive NYPD experience. We had Stephen Miller on before, who's a senior White House. You know who Stephen Miller is, a senior White House guy.
Sure.
Works a lot on the immigration piece. He was talking about getting more cooperation from local law enforcement on immigration issues for federal law enforcement. Can you lay out, We worked in a place where, because it's terrorism, FBI,
Right.
U.S. Marshals, NYPD, everybody's trying to work together for the same mission. On immigration, that is not the case, right? Can you give everyone
That's
some
right.
sense as to what some of the rules are, what some of the walls that are implemented by the mayor, the governor, et cetera, so that NYPD can and can't, what can they do, what can they not do when it comes to helping ICE?
All right, so all of this started under the previous mayor, who was another disaster for this city, a guy named de Blasio, and he put through two pieces of legislation in conjunction with the city council, making New York City a sanctuary city. And that's really the salient thing. We're also a sanctuary state, but NYPD are city employees, and that's what applies. Now, the out, even in this legislation, the out is that if you are a member of a task force, a federal task force, well, then you're federalized and you can do immigration enforcement. You can look into a person's immigration status, and that can be a lever that you use as part of a criminal case. And that's why, Buck, when you and I were in the task force, now those laws were not in place yet, but even had they been, we would have been carved out of it as members of a task force. If you're not a member of the task force, now it becomes a policy and law issue, sort of ping pong game. The policy issue is as follows: they won't honor detainers. Now, a detainer is not an order from a judge. That is something that essentially ICE says, we conjured this. We need a detainer. He's in jail. We need you to hang on to him for a couple of days so we can go get him. And essentially, the local jurisdictions in sanctuary cities say, no, we're not going to do that. They probably can get away with that, even if we go forward and run all the legal traps on it, because it's a separate sovereign, state to federal, etc. Well, you have more trouble, and we're seeing this come to a head now in the case in Milwaukee, is this judge who tried to hide this guy and slip him out the back door. Why? Because ICE had a warrant. And it doesn't matter that it was not from a judge. She tried to hang her hat on that. This is not a judicial warrant. This is an administrative warrant. Some federal agencies can issue their own warrants. This was an arrest warrant, period, end of story. The guy was amenable to deportation. They came with the proper paperwork. She tried to slide him out the door. That's why that case is so important, because ICE can issue administrative warrants all day long. And if the feds win that case, which I think they're gonna, you're gonna now put in, you're gonna concretize the idea that the ICE warrants, the administrative warrants, have the force of law, and judges, you can't get in the way. So now ICE knows where the body's gonna be, because these guys all get locked up. You know that, Buck. They all commit robberies, etc. So
Mm-hmm.
now you know where they're gonna be. They're gonna be in state court. They got to go in front of a judge. You wait in the hallway, just like these guys were doing. You know, they didn't barge into her courtroom. This was all ego. She didn't want them in her building and this other nonsense. You don't own the building. It's a public building. They didn't go into her courthouse. They waited in the hallway, which is what warrant cops do all the time. Now ICE can wait in the hallway. When they know these guys are going to be there, they come out, boom, you got them. Nobody can get in the way, and out they go. And this is crucial to the worst first paradigm that the Trump administration wants to put into place. I think they win this one, and Godspeed to them, because they should.
Paul Mauro, everybody, go check out Karen Reed Retrial Live coming up here in just a few minutes on Fox Nation. Inspector Mauro, always an honor, sir. Come back and talk to us again soon.
Oh, anytime. You guys are the best. Love it.
Thank him. Sounds fantastic. I want to tell you, since 9/11, Tunnel to Towers Foundation has been supporting America's greatest heroes and their families, heroes who protect our communities and our country. Heroes like firefighter James Dickman, who was passionate about fire safety and aspired to do everything in his power to keep his community and fellow firefighters safe. While responding to an apartment fire, James and his crew tried to save people who were thought to be trapped inside. When the situation escalated, James wasn't able to escape. He perished in a blazing inferno. Cause of the fire, arson. James leaves behind his loving wife, Jamie, and his children, Paige and Grant. Tunnel to Towers gave the Dickman family the gift of a mortgage-free home. Jamie's grateful to Tunnel to Towers and to caring friends like you for lifting the financial burden of a mortgage off her shoulders. Donate $11 a month to Tunnel to Towers at T2T.org. That's T, the number 2, T.org.